how to trim and combine profiles on SelfCAD. Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to review another interactive tutorial. I'm going to review how this was done first and explain, because there's actually quite a lot that we can learn from this tutorial. And then I'm going to show a different way to do it using the drawing tools and how it can actually be improved. Before I start, I want to say something that if I'm in no way trying to criticize how this was done, this designer who did this is a much better designer than I am. I'm just a technician, not a designer. Still, there are things that we can review to learn from it, and this is just pure for educational purpose. Okay, so with that said, I'll start here with the basic tutorial on what this is doing. I'll explain the steps, which actually I've learned from this few things, which is I'm sure you will as well. And as I said, I'll then show some other things as well. Okay, so to get started, it starts with a basic cylinder and basic circle, and it sets the number of edges to 12. Now this is important because usually when you see we set the number of edges, is we setting it for the purpose if you want it to be more smooth or less smooth, and based on this how round it should be. In this case, the number 12 is exact figure because it's later going to modify them. So you see that later. Okay, so now it's going to precision settings, and I've shown this in previous videos that we can use the grid vertices to actually allow you to draw with more precision. Okay, so now it starts, if you snap to the grid, it starts with the center grid, and it gives me a place to snap. Now in this case, it didn't have to enter a measurement in any way because the measurement is exactly from the center till this, and based on the size over here, if you go in the workspace settings, I think while playing with the tutorial wouldn't allow me to open it. Yeah, it wouldn't allow me to open the while tutorial, but the size of this is 50, so that means it's 100, which means also that the size of the entire thing is a size of 200 because it's a radius of 100, which is a size of 200. Okay, so now once I have this done, what it's doing now, it tells me to click again on circle tool. Now in real drawing, I think you've seen this in my previous video, you don't have to do this to pause the drawing, you can just click on something else, but I'm not sure if this is how the designer did it or this is just how the tutorial shows you to do that, but nevertheless, the idea here is that you want to start doing something else, so you are pausing the drawing, and in this case it asks you to select vertices. So what it's going to do here is it's going to select every second vertex. I can go and pick every second, or I can just go, in this case, work with marquee selection. Now marquee selection, I'm selecting everything, and in real life you have to manually pick every second vertex because the advanced settings loop selection is not available for vertices, but somehow the interactive tutorials allow you to select, it will automatically pick what needs to be selected. So again, in realistic, if you try to follow this, you have to kind of go over every second vertex and simply select them. Okay, but nevertheless, once I've done this, what it's doing now here is scale. This is something actually I've never used before, and I've learned something new, is it asks me to go to advanced settings from scale, and it's going to turn on the key proportion. Now, you may have seen me using key proportion in previous videos, where I usually use it if I want to scale an entire object proportionately, then this is a great option. In this case, it's selecting only a set of vertices, like every second vertex, and by doing it key proportion, it's actually, I'm setting this to 100, it's actually creating this kind of like a star shape, and this is actually quite incredible. And the reason this works is because this is a symmetrical type of shape. Now if you try, I've tried it, if you try the same shape without key proportion, it will give you a total different results, because in reality, when you're moving these selected vertices, you are moving them actually in two axes. You have moved them in the X and in the Z direction. So, but because they're symmetrical, the key proportion worked. And this, again, this is where design skill comes in, which is something I wouldn't have thought of, as I'm not a designer. But nevertheless, now what's asking, you see it's red, so basically asking me to deselect these vertices, and it actually asks me to deactivate, I guess, this mode. I think there's some empty steps here, could have done it, skipped some steps here just to activate, deactivate, but nevertheless, this is the main idea here. And now it's going to use other circles, so it asks me to turn on 32, which in this case, it's not the exact number that we care, it's just a matter of giving it smoothness, so designer chose this number to make it look smooth. And now it's asking me to deactivate this profile. Now, if you can see later the way I'm going to do it, I'm actually able to do it in the same profile. But the way this designer needed it, they wanted to have a separate profile. And to create a separate profile, there is a feature over here, profile settings, which you have an option to, you see it's blocked in the interactive tutorial, but usually you have an option here to click plus to choose a profile, and you have an option here once you have multiple profiles, you can choose which profile to do here. But the easiest way, and I've been doing this always, is also instead of going to the profile settings, I can just go back to whatever setting I have, and if you deselect a profile and you start drawing again, it automatically creates a new profile. So this is now using precision as far as entering exact measurements. So, and it asks me to do this, and I'm just going to skip through because it's repetitive steps. So I'm going to make next, 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 next. It basically adds all of these profiles, and then it adds a new profile in the center. Okay, so now it exits drawing because it's done with the drawing. So what you have now is you have here two separate profiles, and this designer here is where we're going to start doing later different. But this designer decided to use this way first to fill this. Now I want to say one thing, which I think I've said it in the previous video as well, that until recently the only option to convert a profile into a mesh was to use fill polygon and then add thickness. So that was basically the option. So this part is today much easier. You can actually just go to extrude them. So instead of two steps, fill polygon and then add thickness, you could have just extruded them. But again, this option wasn't available when this tutorial was made, so this is basically was the only option. I explained in the previous video some ideas like when you still want to use this option fill polygon, but in this example, extrusion would have been an easier case. Okay, but now what this designer is doing, deselecting this profile and selecting the other profile, and basically going to repeat the same step. Actually, it's going to move. Let's see where it's moving over here. Oh, it's setting the Y to 1. Okay, so why is the designer setting Y to 1? And this is because I've explained in other video as well about Boolean operations. When you use Stitch and Scoop, you want them to stick out. You don't want them to be flushed, like exactly flat, one object with another. And the designer is going to use here Stitch and Scoop soon, so which is why this operation is done. Okay, now it's being filled, and then add thickness, the same idea as before, just setting it to different height, I guess. Okay, so now what you see here is this is kind of in the center. These cylinders stick out from both sides, so that's mainly the idea. And then you select both files, both objects, and you do a subtraction where you remove all of these cylinders, and you get this mesh done. Now it activates polygon mode, and it asks me to select these polygons, and so it's basically asking me to select the top polygon and the bottom polygon, and after it selected these two polygons, it's going to do an inset. Now why is it doing this inset? It basically just wants to add a section over here so we can later scale it. You'll see later. It's easy to explain just showing what's done. So once you have this done, now basically deselect this, so you can see it selects these side edges. Now, selecting these side edges actually in reality will take a while, and I'll show later why. But for now, what you do is, I'm just going to use this, actually use the next button, just automatically select them. And then it scales it down to 0. So if you scale it down to 0, you kind of get this sharp edges. So the inset basically what it made is that you get this section, and then if you scale it, you can actually make it to 0, which kind of is going to give me this beveled edges around. So it's very difficult to bevel edges like this, and again I'll come back to this in a minute and explain this main idea here. Okay, so now it asks me to deselect the highlighted region. I think I've done this. Let's see. Okay, so just deactivate this, deselect this, and then it's asking me just going to delete, I think, the profiles. So just going to click delete on my keyboard, and basically we are okay, so now it's going to ask me another thing to kind of just finish the tutorial. I'm just going to show it, but it's not relevant. It's going to load another object, which is basically showing where this object, I guess, is designed for. Okay, so I don't need that. I'm just going to undo this. Okay, so actually it's multiple objects. Okay, so here's the thing. What I have a problem with this is that if you see these face structures, these structures are quite complex and it's difficult to select. As I said, I had to select these side edges. I'm sure it took a few steps. It's not terribly wrong, but it took a while to select them because they're not really very nice. If you're going to go resolution 0, try to simplify them, they will clean up a little bit, but not much actually, and it's still not going to be easy to select them. They're not quads, but they have some bigger problems, this object as well, which I'll come back in a moment. I'm just going to show you now. If I turn on the backface coloring, you'll see it has here some flipped faces. here. There's actually some problems with this mesh. It's not terrible. I think it's still considered, I mean, because it's so small, somehow it's still considered manifold. Actually, in reality, it's not manifold, but there's some faces here flipping over one another. And also there's a little bit extra difficult how this was created. So I want to show you, I'm going to hide away this object and just show you the concept how I would have done the same thing, and then explain the differences and why this shape looks like and everything what goes on. Okay, so to do this, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to it doesn't matter, I'm going to play a new tutorial, so it's going to remove this, so my object will be lost once I start a new tutorial. And I'm going to do this very quickly, just skip through to get the basic profiles to make sure I'm dealing with the same object. And I'm just going to show you here, quickly skipping through this, and at the point where I get all of these profiles. Okay, so that's all basically I need. I'm not going to go to anything else. I basically created the steps where I have the profile. I'm going to stop the tutorial. Okay, so I've shown that this is used in two separate profiles, and I'm actually going to, before I do it, I want to show you, if I'm going to select now sections, I can select basically each section individually, or if I'm going to switch to this profile, I can select this entire profile individually. If I go to face mode, or the same idea, if I go to edge mode, you can just select basically individual edges, as I've shown in my previous video. Now, you could have drawn this based on the way I want to do it now. I want to have this as a single profile. So you could have drawn it as a single profile without changing, and it would have automatically cut in. Or if you done it like this, you want to merge profiles, you can just go to simply combine, merge, and this will automatically, actually, if you have cut intersection on, it will automatically cut this in. So now once this is cut in, what this means is that I can actually get the same idea that was used before by simply selecting these faces. So because now it created a cut, and the polygon selection or face selection, doesn't matter, this mode will now select minimum cycles until they interrupt. So this part of the circle actually gets interrupted with these lines. In the same way, these lines get interrupted with this. So I can easily simply create this. And instead of using Stitch and Scoop, I can just do this, which gives me a much cleaner result, as you'll soon see. So once I have selected these, I can simply go and delete, and that's it. So far what I have here is the same idea I got before. Instead of Stitch and Scoop, I could have done a single profile and do this, which is much faster and cleaner. But now if I'm going to do extrusion, I'm simply going to use extrusion, I can get a profile like this. Now, once I get a profile like this, take a look at these faces that you have. Now you have very clean faces. So I could simply go to loop selection, and I can simply click here to loop select, and it gets the entire thing selected really nicely. So this is one benefit. But I'm still going to have the same issue if I do the inset on it, because I'm limited with the face structure. So I'm going to do now the same thing, inset. At some point, if I do, let's say number 3, at some point you'll see if I turn on the back face coloring. Let's actually have a cleaner mesh now, because the Stitch and Scoop gave me a lot of different odd faces, so I was limited a lot more. But so now actually I do have still a little bit here. If you see, if I zoom in, it's kind of the borderline. Maybe 2.5 would have been the max that I can do. It already starts intersecting here. If I'll do more than 3, if I do, let's say 4, number 4, you'll clearly start seeing at some point where they start you can see it over here. It's hard to see, they kind of start over intersecting. Okay, so let me show you what's happening here actually, and why working with the profile is much better. So I'm simply going to get rid of this profile, and what I'm going to do now here is do the same inset on a profile. So let's say I do number 5, even a lot bigger. So you can see over here what's happening here. The inset kind of makes the same object inside and makes the connection. Okay, so it's kind of, if you think about it, like make a copy of it, scale it in, and then draw the connections. But because this is so small and the way it draws the connection, it goes automatic, it turns out that these connections start intersecting, because it goes each one perpendicular to the other, the side. So this needs to go 5 inside and build this. And when it goes this way, at some edges it starts intersecting. Now, I can make this, let's say, -5, and in this case I have enough room, nothing will intersect, because outwards there's enough room until it starts intersecting. But if I make it go inside, this starts breaking. Now, how can I solve this? So first of all, the question is if I need to solve it. I actually do not necessarily need to solve it, because when you have here on profiles, it also creates cuts. So you can see over here, when they intersected, it starts creating these cuts. You can see I can start actually moving them out up this profile because it added a vertex over here that is actually cut in. So when you're doing a mesh, this is where it starts creating the problems I showed before, because when it starts pushing in one to another, it starts like flipping faces. It's not also cutting at the same time. It doesn't have capabilities of cutting. When working with profiles, it automatically cuts everything. Look how it cuts everything over here. That's one thing. The other thing is you can actually fix it over here much easier. So I can go to edit details, okay, and I can start simply go to the collapse tool, would be the best tool for this, where I can start simply collapsing vertices over here. So I can click this over here, this vertex over here. Oh, let's see if I just click on it. This go over here. Oh, I think I didn't click on it. Let me just move it here back. Okay, these. So you can see how easily this is connected over here. Even if I want to, let's say, to remove this edge, I can remove this. So I can really play around and clean this up really nicely. There is another way if edit details becomes too kind of in cases like this, too many vertices here, and you want to make them faster than, or if you have a problem selecting them, they're too close, too difficult to select. There's another way to do it. I can simply go to vertex selection, select all of these vertices, and then I can go to snap tool. And in the snap tool, there's an advanced option to collapse vertices, and then I choose a section where to collapse it. Over here, everything is collapsed. The only thing is that the snap tool wouldn't automatically remove the duplicates, so I'll have to go now to remove duplicates, geometry clean, and kind of choose the remove duplicates, and it removed basically 5 vertices. It removed some edges over here. So I haven't cleaned up yet everything, some of them, but I want to show you another problem here, which is a general problem with drawing, not necessarily this. Whenever you go to fill polygon or extrusion, they need to find polygons. Now over here we still have an issue with some cutting. You may need to clean it up, but I think it may still even find it already. But the problem here is that it's limited how much you can find like nested polygons. So this is a polygon within a polygon. Each of these has a lot of lines to connect, which is going to control the way the geometry is created, which is not a problem. But then you kind of keep on having it nested, and at some point it's going to fail. So if you do extrusion, you see it actually didn't fill everything, it didn't find everything. So I have different ways to fix this. I can clean it up, but the easiest way would be actually is to kind of remove this section, and I'm kind of gonna, let's say, split this off, and I'm gonna fill only the outer part. Okay, so if I do only the outer part, now it finds it correctly, perfectly fine, and now I can fill in the remaining part. I can kind of either fill this separately and do a stitch and scoop subtraction, or you can use the cut with profile and do it. So let's say I'm just going to align this on top of the mesh 3 and top of mesh 3 like this, and I can simply go cut with profile, and it actually cuts out this part over here. So basically now I can go to the part selection, and you can see I can select this part. It's actually cut out. So this is basically how this is done. However, I want to show you another thing here is also, so if you're going to do it on the mesh to inset, the way I've done it before, there's actually no option to control what you need to inset. But the reality is I actually didn't need to inset all of this. Let's see if I can just bring back everything. I actually didn't need to inset this entire thing, because what I need is, there's no reason for me actually, okay, if I'm here, there's no reason to inset and mess up this center part. And this is another benefit of working with profiles that I can choose. So I can go to polygon selection or face selection, doesn't matter, anything that allows me to select a cycle, a minimum cycle, and select only the outside part, and now go inset only on this one. And now I have much cleaner the center part. So again, I may need to clean this up, and if I would design this for final production or something, I would really clean this up. Go to either edit details, or as was shown before with the snap, collapse vertices, and clean this up. But for now, I'm just going to use the extrusion, and the extrusion actually detects this as a whole now. It detects the polygon, finds it differently, and maybe fill polygon would detect it better. So fill polygon actually in this case it's less complicated. I was able to find it. So now I can go to actually I wanted to have it as a whole. I forgot what the design was asking for. Okay, never mind. If you ended up doing it this way, you can just go to part selection and deleting this profile, which would be the same thing, but and then go add thickness. So it's either extrusion or do it this way and add thickness, and now you have what you need. which is basically this entire object. And now because I have this nice structure over here, so first of all let me show you over here, there's no, even if my back face coloring is on, there's no problems here, because as you can see these are split separate faces. There's nothing that intersects each other. As I said, final production, this is not nice. I would have cleaned up these faces, but even if you don't want to clean it up, these faces are simply flat faces separately. There's no intersections, nothing pushing in, because it was created after the profile was cut automatically for all of these things. But now if I want to do the same design that was asking over there, I have the same cut, so I can go to face selection and loop select, simply loop select these and scale it to 0, and I get the same design, exact same design we had before, just much cleaner. And I can even remove these extra edges here using edit details, but nevertheless this is actually much cleaner. Now these edges will still not be as nice over here. This is not because there's something wrong with it, it's just the way you're scaling something, these small faces looks like that. So which is another reason why you would actually want to clean up this profile. And I'm just going to show it quickly once more. How I can do it is showing you two ways how we do it. So the first way would be, let's say, snap idea. So you think about, I have this vertex cannot be snapped to this because this will kind of move it in. So I have to think what I can snap where. So this can snap to this can snap to this, but this can only snap to this. So the first idea would be, let's say if I do this, and I go to snap, and then I choose collapse vertices, and I snap it to this. And then you see this tool is a lot more annoying to use because you cannot actually change selection. So I'll have to exit the tool. I'll have to then use snap this to this, which, you know, I can again select both of them, both of these select, and go to the snap tool, or separately for this case use the edit details collapse. I mean, yeah, collapse here or edit details feature over there. Oops, I did it the wrong way, so I have to turn on this to this. See, actually, I did it wrong actually. Collapse vertices. Okay, collapsed over here. So now you can see, I don't use that tool a lot. So you can see it's cleaned up over here, but I still have to go to geometry clean and remove duplicates, which removed all of these, and now we have this cleaned up. I'm sorry. Now we're going to show the same thing doing with the edit details tool, which is in some cases it's a little bit more difficult to have these tiny faces, collapse them, but some things are much easier. So it's much easier to take this and move it here. This is really easy, and it automatically remove the vertices and the edges that need it, so I don't need to use our tool. And then I can use this, move this here, and then let's say move this here. So I have to select this and move it here. So somehow it doesn't allow me to select it here. It gives me difficulty to select them. Okay, so that's basically it. I think I actually still selected them wrong, so I'll make sure I do it now correct. So if I select first this, yes, okay, and now move it here. Okay, see, when they get very close to each other, actually give me some difficulty selecting them. So I'm not sure why, but looks like they have some difficulty selecting these faces. So yeah, so it's, as you know, you have a fallback is the snap tool in this case. I'm just gonna look up again why. I'll try to enter. Yeah, so I think the easiest way is, let me try just once more at the details. Somehow when they're very close, that details is sometimes problematic. They're just too close to each other and you can't click on it. So yeah, in this case you can see I have difficulty over here. In this case it's much easier, the option to use this, where I can simply snap them. And there's actually another way I don't have to collapse. Collapse is used when you collapse a lot of faces. So I actually want to show you that you don't have to collapse. I can simply select one vertex and go snap, and snap this vertex to this. So, but again, the same thing, because they're so close to each other, it gets difficult to select. So actually you do have to, and normally if you want to snap, let's say this to this, it's not a problem. I select this single vertex and I simply snap it to this vertex, and that's quite easy, it's not a problem. But if you want to do what I just did, they're so close to each other. Okay, now it worked, okay? But in case if it doesn't work, you can just do selecting both of these vertices, and then you don't have a problem because you don't need to make a selection. Selection is making a problem to make it like this. Then if you just collapse the vertices, you just click on one point where to collapse it to, and that's it. So yeah, so between these you can clean them up, but then you have to remember, when you use a snap tool, you have to remove the duplicates, and that's basically it. The other thing is final. Let's do it quickly. I mean, here you see you can also change the thickness, how far this should be. If you want to make this exact, you see this is thinner over here than here, you can go to the measurement tool and you can move from here to here and enter a value. Let's say you want this to be 4, so you type it in, but now it worked the opposite way. So I can choose actually to the end. I want to move the end, depend which direction I want to move, and oops, what did I do? You click here, and then you click here, and then you enter the value, let's say 4, and it moved it. And you have actually the same idea in edit details, where you can add an offset to the collapse, which is the same idea. You go to edit details, and you can choose collapse with an offset, let's say of 4, and then you can choose start, enter both, and then you can just move from one point to another, and it will snap with an offset of 4. So that's basically the same idea. You can actually also, instead of doing this inset, you could have just copied the profile, the outside profile, and use cut with profile, and make it smaller, scale it in, use cut with profile to cut them out. So it's another way of doing it. But overall, this is the idea where working with profiles gives you a lot more flexibility. The cutting is much easier. You could have inset as such as the outside, not keeping this. There's a lot more flexibility in making manifold meshes. While working with meshes, all of these tools work very nice, but it's limited. You have to know when to use it. And for example, inset, if you inset too much, it will break it. Then the face structure is not so nice after using Stitch and Scoop. Over here you can keep nice quads. But that's basically it. And the beauty of SelfCAD is that all of these tools work the same way for profiles and meshes. I think there's no other software that does it this way. Usually you have completely different mode, different set of tools. You have like a trim tool separately. Everything is separate. And over here, you just use the same tools, the same face selection to select sections, and to cut out, simply delete. So yeah, it's much simpler, much easier. And hope you've learned something from this tutorial. And please let me know in the comments if you want me to show anything else. Thanks for watching. Bye.